good day to be Donald Trump if you believe the latest poll numbers. A new poll from NBC News and the Des Moines Register found the former president leads his closest competitors, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, in crucial Iowa by 32 points. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley trailing by 35 points, while businessman Vivek Ramaswamy sits in single digits at 5%. Trump is also sitting pretty in battleground states, Georgia and Michigan. Trump leads President Biden in the Peach State by 5 points among likely voters. In Michigan, that lead expands to 10 points over President Biden.
Biden's poor poll numbers in Michigan can likely be chalked up to displeasure among voters surrounding the president's response to the siege on Gaza. A CBS Morning segment pointed out that in states like Michigan with large Muslim populations, those negative feelings could spell doom for Biden. Let's watch.
23-year-old Adam Abu Saleh's concerns about President Biden are an alarm bell for Democrats.
He's killing our people.
4 years ago, he campaigned for the president, urging neighbors in predominantly Arab-American Dearborn, Michigan, to vote against Donald Trump.
If you were to ask me 2 months ago if I was going to vote for Joe Biden, yeah, I would have held my nose and voted for him.
He's worried about the health of the economy. But now, as the administration continues standing by Israel's deadly attacks on Gaza,
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Abu Saleh says he and his community can no longer support the president.
Compounding Biden's issues, a new Reuters Ipsos poll suggests that third-party candidate RFK Jr. could sap more votes from Biden than Trump and give the former president the boost he needs to finish across the finish line first.
Yeah, so that is an interesting result because obviously we've talked a lot lately about RFK Jr. Having more of a detrimental effect on Trump, frankly, of taking votes from Trump, which you can understand the reasoning for that. Obviously, there's some crossover appeal on COVID and some other things. Ukraine, RFK Jr.'s had a lot of combativeness with the mainstream media, which has made him attractive to conservatives. But according to this poll, this one had him taking support from Biden somewhat significantly. When RFK's candidacy was factored into the poll, Trump's lead over Biden grew to 5%. His overall support dropped to 36%, but Biden's fell to 31% from 38 to 36, with RFK Jr. taking 16% of the vote.
Yeah, it is a tough time for Joe Biden. I mean, I think one of the most notable aspects of the interview with the young Arab American man from Michigan is that even before the siege on Gaza, he said he was willing to hold his nose and vote for Biden, and that Biden's support of Israel's bombing campaign, which has now resulted in the deaths of 18,000 Gazans, has pushed him from wanting to hold his nose to vote for Biden to absolutely not being willing to do so. I mean, at best, we had nose holding, right? At best, we had begrudging support. And we knew that, right? Right from the beginning of Joe Biden's candidacy, we saw those polls, we discussed those polls that showed that something like over 70% of Democratic voters didn't want Joe Biden to be the nominee. And instead of addressing that concern by, at very least, allowing there to be a primary process, they said there will be no primary. How many times did we see Simone Sanders and other pundits and politicos say there will be no primary? They decided there will be no debates. No unofficial debates have been really hosted. There was a kind of a debate held on the Young Turks recently, but nothing on the mainstream media. And we just had the news last week that the Florida Democratic Party moved ahead and decided that only Joe Biden will be on the Florida ballot. This is the Democratic Party's choice. So how can they, I'm sure they're going to start doing voter shaming in full force as we get closer to the election, but really, realistically, how can they claim, given all they've done to ensure that only Joe Biden could be the nominee, despite him being historically unpopular and polling so poorly, how can they blame anybody but themselves for the likely outcome here, which is that Donald Trump wins again?
I couldn't agree more. They are doing nothing, even at the same time that they say democracy itself is at stake and that we value democracy above all else. There's no greater crime than doing something contrary to democracy. They're not holding a real primary. Joe Biden is not debating the people challenging him, Marianne, Cenk Uygur, others, Dean Phillips. Not going to have it. His acolytes, when they go on TV, they're going to say, sorry, he's the king. You gotta kneel down.
They say no one else is running.
Yeah.
They repeatedly just say, they go on MSNBC and CNN. Yeah. People like K-City QB on Twitter collects these clips repeatedly on a daily basis almost. You catch somebody saying, well, no one's running against Biden.
Yeah.
Unchallenged.
Yeah, they believe he just by virtue of being the incumbent president, he just gets he gets it automatically. That's the view, which isn't democratic at all, and doesn't seem particularly wise given how unpopular he is and how old he is perceived to be by his own voters. I was reading some survey results. It might have been from this poll. I can't recall recent polling, so it might have been this, looking at on specific issues, how you trust Trump or Biden over Trump, how you feel about the two candidates. And Biden was behind Trump massively on on economic issues, on leading the country. Then there were some, there's the kind of like in basic integrity questions where you'd think where Democrats would have to hope, well, at least Biden should be way ahead of Trump on these, where it's close. Like Biden's ahead a little bit on the things that are perceived to be strengths, and Trump is just destroying him on everything else. Abortion is the only thing for which Biden's favorability is significantly in the positive direction compared to Trump. Some other things are close, and then on the the major fundamental questions that people are going to be going to the polls over inflation, over the economic situation, over who you trust to run the country. Yeah. People are picking Trump because Biden seems so old to them.
Yeah. Spot on. Nothing to add to that. I would just also pick up on the beginning part of our read where we talked about Trump's lead on the Republican candidates here. It is notable that while there's still, of course, a very large gap, the lead that he has over DeSantis and the lead that he has over Nikki Haley is very close, suggesting not a lot of daylight between those two candidates. DeSantis was discussed as the fait accompli from the beginning of this thing, and he has managed to just lose every time that he does a debate and is exposed to the public, where Haley is the only one, I mentioned this I think earlier last week, who is consistently gaining. Now, we haven't had a lot in the way of new polls since the last debate, but again, this is one of those moments where the pundit class says, Ramaswamy is drawing a lot of attention, Haley is flailing, but that doesn't seem to be bearing out in terms of the actual poll. So I do wonder what that means for her. I don't think it's likely that it means that she'll be sitting in the White House in the Oval Office. Whether or not it means she becomes a more appealing vice presidential pick, you are skeptical about that for reasons that I think are legitimate. But it's interesting to keep watching what comes of the Haley surge.
I mean, it would be interesting if there was genuinely, if Trump ceased to exist, where would that 51% and how would it break down among the other candidates? I think a lot of it would go into the DeSantis column and the Ramaswamy column more so than the Haley column. But you don't know. Obviously, she has a lot of charisma. I think she's normal sounding, frankly, especially for non-Republicans, don't seem spooked by her, which, look, is an asset. Again, it's not pleasing enough to a lot of Republican primary voters, but I've said this before, and I'm sure I'll say it many times over again. This is a country that is certainly capable of blue states elect Republican, perceived to be moderate, nice Republicans. In blue states, they win, and you could duplicate this on a national level if Republican primary voters were willing to be a little bit more strategic in their voting. Now, I'm not endorsing the idea that she's actually a more moderate candidate. It depends on the issues. She's more moderate on abortion. She's more moderate seeming in her presentation. Her foreign policy is it's as hawkish as it can possibly be. Whether that makes it conservative or liberal is unclear at this point. But she is an advocate for a wildly interventionist foreign policy that I don't think fits the mood of the Republican Party and really never has. So there's that aspect of it. But when she's talking on any other subject, she seems certainly like the one, and polling suggests would be the most likely to defeat Biden. Although certainly anyone is capable of it.
And largely because of that perceptibly, superficially more moderate stance on abortion. And especially, and we'll talk about this in an upcoming segment, given some pretty draconian abortion decisions that are coming out of Texas right now. So stick around for that, and we'll have more Rising for you right after this.